Hey guys, I'm Mike Roy from Reel Cast Shredders, and today I'm going to be talking about rigging a finesse fish from Lunker City. This is the 5 3/4 inch finesse fish. And we're going to be rigging this on a jig head. And the jig head that I like to use is the Z-Man jig head. Couple of reasons why. It's open. They have this great collar which is going to hold and secure the bait to the jig head so it's not going to keep sliding back. Some jig heads have a big barb and they'll split the bait. The other reason why I like this is the jig head hook. It has a good hook and it's the appropriate size for this size bait. The size hook I'm using here is the 6-0 hook, so that hook will match up well with the 5 3/4 inch bait. I use anywhere from a 3/8 to a 1 ounce jig head depending on wind and current. So the first thing we're going to do when we take one of these out of the package is, you can see it has a little bit of a pointy nose. So I want to go ahead and trim that straight with a razor blade. This way it'll sit flat against the jig head. So we're just going to take about 1/8 of an inch off of the nose there. And then the second trick I like to do is something I learned from watching Rich Z's bass blog, and that is we're going to put a split in this bait. Reason why, for two reasons. Where this hook comes out of the bait, we want that to be open. Otherwise, we're going to get a split. The bait is going to split. We're going to get much more durability if we put the split in ahead of time. It'll prevent the bait from ripping as we are hooking fish. The second reason is we want this bait to sit nice and straight on this jig head. If you've ever rigged this before and you don't come out the right area, the bait will either be bunched up or it'll be stretched out and it'll spiral and it won't swim right. So we're going to go ahead and hold the bait up to the hook, see where the exit point of the hook is, and mark that with our finger. We're going to flip the bait over, take a razor blade and put about a 1 inch split. Try to go dead center of the bait here, okay? And that's it. We have a nice split. I could actually see through the bait there. It's only about 1 inch long. Now we're going to go ahead and take our jig head. And very important that we go dead center of the bait. We don't want to come in on any kind of angle. And we're going to run this right into that slit that we just put. And the last step is, before we slide it over the collars, we want to coat it with a little bit of crazy glue. And that is just really going to give it that extra durability. You're going to be able to catch a lot of fish on one bait. And there we have it. That bait is rigged nice and straight. It's going to swim well. It's not going to spiral in the water. And we're going to have a durable bait that we're going to be able to catch a lot of fish on. All right, so I want to show you this technique. It's important to have the jig near the bottom. So you see I let out some line there. I'm snapping the rod tip up. And the majority of my hits are going to come on the way down. There we go. You can see that as the jig was sinking. So with that being said, it's critical that you let the rod tip fall at the same speed as the jig. If you let the rod tip fall too quickly and you have slack in the line, you're going to miss all your bites and you're not going to be very successful. So I'm still allowing the jig to free fall. And as I'm lowering that rod tip, as that jig is sinking, I'm ready to set. As soon as that jig stops or any little tap that I feel, I'm always feeling for that bite. And the old saying, hook sets are free. So if you feel anything, set the hook. And you'll find, again, most of your bites are going to come on the way down.
No, you just had some spunk.
This is a really deadly technique when fish are holding near the bottom. And you'll see in a minute my underwater footage. These fish are sitting very tight to the bottom. As we're landing fish, we find that they have sand on their nose. So they are feeding on something that's in the sand, and they're not going to rise up high in the water column. That's why this technique works so well. And you can see I drop my Go Fish camera down here, and the fish are curious. They're coming up to the camera, checking it out. I was hoping to see what they were feeding on, but I wasn't able to see what it was. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I like using the Z-Man jig heads. We're using the 1 ounce jig head with the 5 3/4 ounce finesse fish. Reason being is it has the appropriate size hook for that size lure. It's a 6.0 hook. And what you'll find is if you go to a larger bait, a larger soft plastic, it's not going to hold the bottom as well. Now, if you were fishing in the summertime for bigger fish, you may want to use a bigger bait. But early spring, these fish are all in the 20 to 30 inch range. So that's the perfect size bait. Another important thing that's going to help the jig stay near the bottom is we're using a light line. So here I'm using 15-pound Power Pro Super Slick, and that thin diameter braided line is going to cut the water really well and not create a lot of drag, and that allows that lure to stay near the bottom. I do use a short leader, 2 to 3 feet of 30-pound either monofilament or fluorocarbon, just to give you some protection and something to grab onto. And the setup I'm using, it has to be light and sensitive, so I prefer this G Loomis E6X. It's the 843 SF model, light, sensitive, and that's set up with a Shimano Stratic 4000. Last thing about technique is, again, it's important to stay near the bottom. And what you're going to find is as you're working the jig, you're going to get scope on the line. And what scope is that jig is going to start to no longer be vertical. It's going to start to drift out. When that happens, the lure starts to rise up off the bottom. So you have to flip your bail open and let that jig sink back to the bottom. And after you do that a few times, that scope is going to get too far out from the boat and the lure will no longer be near the bottom. So at that point you reel up and you're going to drop it back down. And one tip when dropping it down is to flip it a little bit up drift of the boat. And so by the time it sinks, you'll be straight vertical with it. And here we go, more underwater footage. You see these fish sitting near the bottom. It's a sandy bottom. It's stirred up, pretty poor visibility. So again, I think that's why this is so such a successful technique, is that we're keeping that lure right in the strike zone. And the last thing I'll say, if you notice, all of our bites are coming right on the edge of the rip line, and that's because and that's very common when you're fishing a reef. These fish are holding right on the top of the reef or just on the back side of it, and that's where you get that transition from calm water to rough water. And it's important as you start to come off the back side of the reef, it starts to get deeper. You have to let line out, and again, keep that jig near the bottom. That's it. I hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, please subscribe to my channel. It helps support my business, Reel Cast Charters, and it'll allow me to continue to put out more videos. Thanks a lot. Done. Yeah. There he is. Right off the bottom, yeah. And it's right in the rip line, I know, yeah. Well, they're sitting right on the top of the hump, you know. Nah, I think it's just, I think the ocean fish, it seems like when they got the sea lice on them, they're a little bit more spunk to them. Oh, there he is. Not that time. Another bass. So I'll make sure that you're pulling it when you're out that way. You're kind of pulling against the current a little bit. So you're probably riding up a bit. But if you just go straight down, you just got to feed out a little bit of line and just make sure you're right off the bottom. There he is. Right off the bottom. It was just right ahead of the rip line, right in the face of it. Got him? Doubled up. All right. They do, yep. He's got all this, look at that. He's got all the sand on his head. Look at this. He's digging down. They're eating shrimp or crabs. I mean, it's just.
Gotta be right on the bottom.
Yep. They're burying their face.